Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where you'll hear from industry leaders in science, technology, and innovation about the power of strategic storytelling. With decades of experience, our guests will share their own insights and real-world stories to help you avoid red light barriers and ignite green light solutions. From the Zoom room to the boardroom. In each episode, we'll corkscrew downward into the guests' personal experiences of challenge and success, highlighting strategies that turn complex ideas into clear, compelling storylines for stakeholders. Here is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips to try immediately to drive the vision of innovation with your team. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Red Light, Green Light. I am Cindy Skalicky, your host for this episode, and I have brought to you an incredible guest named Samir Kanuga. Samir, welcome.
Thank you, Cindy. Great to be on here with you.
It's so good to see you, and I'm excited for what you're going to be able to bring to our listeners today. Samir is the Chief Financial Officer in the hospitality industry and has a really beautiful storyline in terms of how he arrived at this place. We had a few conversations before getting on today, and Samir, you have, for our listeners who aren't watching this on YouTube, let me describe your background. You've got a photo behind you of a large airplane with a few statements that say, live playfully, seek adventures, and be inspiring. So why don't we kick off having you explain to us what that means to you?
Sure. Thank you, Cindy, and pleasure to be on here with you. That's my personal philosophy. So I've got a picture of this Global Express.
Yeah.
And the 6 words that I always live by is live playfully, seek adventures, and be inspiring. And that's really how I try to live my life. So I love to fly. That's one of my passions. I've been teaching flying since I was 18 years old, and I'm always up for an adventure.
Yeah.
My dad would say I'm always joking around, so I live playfully. And I try to be inspiring. When I was young, as a younger pilot, so I started flying when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
And I always had a lot of mentors, both in aviation and in my work as a CFO, so in my finance industry.
That's fantastic.
I always had so many mentors, and this is my way of giving back. So I always remember to be inspiring, to help the next generation.
I love that. And you bring something fresh to the sort of the 3 letters CFO, right? I mean, most of us think, oh, finance, that's such a, it's kind of just a number crunching kind of a place to sit. And frankly, I'm just not as much a numbers person as I'm sure wouldn't surprise any of our listeners given the work that we do at On Point. But I'm guessing that your philosophy on leadership and life has helped you become a more inspiring leader as a CFO and brought maybe some new some new energy to the 3 letters of CFO.
Exactly.
Can you share a little bit about your journey to becoming a CFO? Like, what was life like before you did that?
Sure. I really consider myself to have 3 full-time jobs right now.
Okay.
I work as a CFO in the hospitality industry.
Okay.
I'm a very proud father of 3. We've got twin girls and a baby boy.
Oh my gosh.
And I give a lot of credit to my wife for being such a great mom.
Me too. I give a lot of credit to her too.
Exactly. There's a lot going on in the household. And as I mentioned, I just love to fly. So aviation is my passion.
Yeah. So CFO, dad of twin girls and a son, plus father. And then thirdly, pilot, which is a really fun passion that I'm sure, built and spent a lot of time doing in terms of your life. It makes me wonder, Samir, did somebody kind of point you on the path of becoming a pilot? How did you ignite that fire?
Sure. I give a lot of credit to my dad.
Okay.
We're very close, him and I. And he was a private pilot. So he just flew recreationally around Southern California where he learned how to fly. And he bought me my first flight lesson when I was 12 years old.
Oh my gosh.
That's what got it going.
12 years old, you can fly at 12?
Took lessons at 12 years
You're
old.
kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
I soloed when I was at the age of 16.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah, he was a big inspiration in my life.
Yeah.
And he bought me that lesson, and it just kept growing up, with
Yeah.
that. I originally thought, oh, I'll just get my private pilot license, just fly around for fun.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then my instructor actually pushed me. He said, well, you've come this far. You might
Mhm.
as well get your instrument rating.
Oh,
And
now
so I
what does
did.
that mean? How is that different than your license?
Yeah, so the private pilot allows you to just fly in really good weather
Okay.
around town. And the instrument rating allows you to fly in bad weather,
Okay.
clouds. And it's just really good training. It just makes you a better pilot, even if you don't fly in clouds that much.
Okay.
And
So you have
so
to have extra training to fly through the
a
clouds.
lot more extra training.
Okay. I
Exactly.
would
A lot more
imagine.
extra training.
Mhm.
And then he said, well, you've come this far. You might as well just get your commercial pilot license. And so I did, and I then instructor, and now I have my airline pilot license and flight
Wow.
instructor certificate.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Amazing. Okay. Let me take that a step further and ask, what are some of the similarities you can draw for us and for our listeners around flying an airplane and running, your team as a CFO? Are there some things that overlap or things you've learned to take from flying into your work?
oh, absolutely. Flying has been really good at giving a lot of discipline. You have to follow
Mm,
the checklist, be
sure.
really thorough when you're checking the airplane, going through the
Hmm.
checklist and just making sure that everything is done correctly. So safety
Hmm.
first.
Hmm.
And I used that mentality when I was the CFO at Royal Paper. It
Okay.
was, while CFOs are always thinking about bottom line numbers, for
Hmm.
me, it was more about the people and keeping them
Hmm.
safe. So we
Hmm.
always started all of our meetings, and it didn't matter if it was accounting or operations or logistics, every single meeting started with safety.
I
And that's
love it.
something that I brought back from aviation.
Oh, it makes total sense. You have to check. So interesting, right? My daughter was on an airplane about a month ago. She's 19, and she called me from the airplane and said, "Mom, the plane is low on fuel, and they're going to need to land us early and then get us fueled up to go." So you can
Mm.
imagine my heart
Yeah,
rate going up.
exactly. Oh,
But it was absolutely safety first situation. And then interestingly, when we kind of got through that mess and we had to change up her travel, we found out in the end, Samir, that the reason they didn't have enough fuel is because of hurricane winds that had come in from the south that were requiring more fuel from the plane
mm.
they had
Yep.
loaded it with, which I never even knew was possible. So to your point, because I was a little upset at the pilots, to be honest with you. I was like, why don't you have enough fuel? And they had done the checklist correctly, but they didn't have enough to drive through those winds and those
Unexpected.
clouds. So
Yep.
that was very interesting to me. And you have to be
Yeah.
ready for anything.
In business, that's a great analogy, is you can plan for a lot of things, but sometimes something unexpected will happen and
Yeah.
get you off guard. But that's really good. I'm glad the pilots,
Yeah.
acknowledge the error or the problem,
Yes. Right, right,
and they
right.
took the time to.
Well, let me ask you a question because this podcast is largely around kind of red lights versus green lights when it comes to business and communication and storytelling, especially when the story is tricky to tell, right? Maybe it's dry data or it's just complex information. Let's just stick with your airplane and your travel and your piloting for a second. Literally, have you ever had any red lights going off on your dashboard that have created any sense of urgency where you had a lot of risk?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I had a engine out in a single engine aircraft.
Oh my God.
I
The
was
one engine that you had went out.
exactly.
Oh, geez.
I was teaching here in Phoenix,
Okay.
and we were just finishing up a long 2-hour lesson in the middle of the summer.
Okay.
And we'd just come off of an airport, and about 1,000 feet above the ground, just boom, and then complete silence.
Oh
No.
my gosh.
And so I went back and I just started thinking about my training. And my
Hmm.
instructor said, you're going to think about your checklist and all the training that we've done. And I did. So I stayed in instructor mode and I
Okay.
talked to my student. I said, okay, student, we've got an emergency.
Hmm.
What do we do? Let's run through our checklist, and we need to turn the airplane back around to land
Hmm.
where we just took off from.
Hmm.
And so I stayed in instructor mode. and talked him through it, and we made it. So from complete silence, engine out, to being on the ground was only about 35 seconds. It was really quick.
Oh my gosh.
And you just
Wow.
don't even have time to think. You just have to rely on that
Right.
training, the instinct. And that's what happened. So we
Oh my
landed
gosh.
safely. And then I started shaking and it
Oh,
really hit me.
the adrenaline, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, it makes me think about that feeling of mastery that you must have had when it came to your aircraft. And just to use the analogy, when we talk about presentations that we're giving in a place where we're very nervous or we have a lot of high stakes coming, or high stakes environment, that's what you were in, right? When I work with clients and we talk with teams in science and technology and innovation, and we work on really perfecting the storyline and the story arc to maximize the impact of the message, we talk a lot about having mastery of the message. And so this is true in
Yep.
any
That's right.
discipline, right? You had total mastery of your aircraft, and therefore you did not succumb to panic.
That's exactly right. That's a
Right.
great, yep, exactly.
I mean, that's where, so for presentation skills, maybe you can help us understand in your industry of finance, if you can reflect for a second, Samir, do you think about whoever might be on your team presenting or presentations that you've been watching as an audience member? What are some of the red light moments that you observe in others? And a red light moment, for our listeners new to our podcast, a red light moment is when you see something that's not working in the presentation. You're getting like that error message of like, that's not, I'm confused, I'm lost, I'm not inspired, I'm losing my attention. Those are red light
Mm,
moments in a
yep,
presentation. What is happening in your finance industry presentations world?
sure. There's some CFOs that will keep it dry. Of course, finance is a lot about numbers.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the presentations can get dry and
Mm-hmm.
just data driven all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's a big red light
Yeah.
is as a CFO, I like the numbers to tell a story or really come to life. And
Yes.
so what I appreciate about your training is the mastery behind it, is just
Yeah.
going through and telling the story, rehearsing that, and a lot of practice.
Right.
You're
Lots of
big on
practice.
practice. Yep.
Practice will get you to a green light, and your audience will get to a green light if they like the content of what you have practiced, right? That's kind of
Exactly.
the
Yep.
essence there. So, do you happen to have an example of kind of like a green light moment where either you nailed it or you were in the audience and you felt compelled to act? Is there anything that's coming up for you where it's like green light, go, like, yes, I'm in, I'm ready to work. What's
I
happening?
have to share a story of
Oh,
my dad.
go for
And
it.
so this was at Royal Paper.
Okay.
Um, Many years ago, he was the CFO, and there was a huge fire at our paper mill.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
there's a big lightning storm in the middle of the desert. You can imagine these big desert storms, and
Oh yeah.
lightning hit the paper storage building.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that did not go well
Oh
together
my gosh.
and just burst into flames. Now,
Oh my
luckily,
gosh.
everyone evacuated and everyone was completely fine. And
Wow.
so the fire was just burning. It was a huge fire.
Okay.
We had the neighboring Air Force and the fire department come and help put out the flames.
Oh my gosh.
And the biggest
Terrifying.
portion of that, now he was the CFO at the time, I took that role just after him,
Okay.
is being able to go down to the site. And he went there. He's got a hotel and stayed there for a week and was shoulder to shoulder with everybody
Mm.
and really worked and communicated with all the employees to let them
Mm.
know their job is safe because this is a
Mm.
huge, huge devastation to the business.
Right.
One,
Right.
employees, we will rebuild.
Mm.
And going through with the vendors, because we had a
Hmm.
lot of raw materials coming to the facility and there was
Hmm.
no warehouse to receive anything.
Oh my gosh.
So he had to get on the phone with the vendors, the
Yeah.
banks, there was bank
Yeah.
debt. So working with the banks and letting them know that we've, hit a speed bump and
A
we
big one. Yeah.
exactly. So within
Yes.
2 weeks, they had a makeshift warehouse
Okay.
They had their vendors all help them out to either
Mhm.
keep raw materials in their warehouse and deliver it just in time. And
Yes.
within 2 weeks, they got the machine up and running and the business flourished. So,
That's incredible. I mean, talk about like actual red lights, but also just the people feeling, that they were facing a red light, if you will, of potentially losing their jobs. The factory was in some ways completely damaged, and the financing would have been risky for a bank or someone else to come in and invest further I mean, hopefully there was insurance at play and things going
exactly.
on there, right?
Yeah,
But your dad must have, well, let me just take a guess. He probably was a skilled speaker and leader so that he could do what you did in the airplane. And he
exactly.
just stayed calm and
Stayed
knew
calm.
that he had a way to inspire his people.
Yep.
Tell me more about that. Pull on that
Yeah,
thread.
he spoke from the heart, and really
Yeah.
that's what it came down to is, we can review the numbers day in and day out, but he spoke from the heart and really
Yep.
believed in all of that and
Yep.
and built a really strong team. The
Yes.
employees were behind him, the
Yes.
vendors, the customers, everybody.
Yes.
And they all
Yes.
stuck together and made this thing really shine.
Well, for you leaders listening, when it's like when you least expect it, those red blinking lights from an organizational perspective might happen. And when we have those errors or those real big pitfalls that we don't see coming, it's then when you are being tested to lean into your leadership mantras and to say, I can remain calm in the face of this storm. I can bring, some green light positivity and momentum and action if I have mastered my message, which in this case is like my leadership message,
Exactly.
right? And your dad certainly had built a tremendous amount of trust amongst the team and done so with heart.
Yeah.
I would imagine you do this. Maybe you've taken some of these lessons and aimed to build the same type of trust with your team. Samir, is this kind of where you hope that you're kind of following as well? Talk
Exactly.
about
Oh
how
yeah,
you lead your
I've
team.
learned a lot
Mhm.
from my dad.
Yeah.
And it's all about that leadership. So taking the numbers, making the numbers come to life, and spending a
Hmm.
lot of time with the team and the customers and the
Yeah.
vendors and the banks,
Yeah.
and really
Yeah.
communicating a clear and consistent message.
I want to pick up one piece you said earlier, Samir, before we kind of go into the next section here, which is around data as story. And that is, you're spot on. That's exactly what we need to think about data as. And so when you are, take us into a situation where you might need to present numbers to your team or to the executive team or the board or whoever it is. What is one of the first things you think about as you look at the numbers and try to figure out that storyline? And the reason that I'm asking this is this tends to be tricky for people who are real analytical thinkers, very logical minded. But you bring this other life experience of your pilot license experiences and just some that round you out in my mind as far as head and heart being very
Mhm.
powerful in your leadership style. What can you say to someone listening who's data driven, when it's like, oh, how do I get past that barrier when I look at the data? Is there any tip you could share about how to start thinking about that data as a story?
What I do, I don't know if it's right or wrong or whatever, but what I do is I I can feel the numbers. And just
Mm,
like I can feel the airplane as it's flying through the air, the
wow,
turbulence and the
that's
mountain waves, I can feel the numbers and it just comes to me. And that it's not just looking at the numbers. It's
awesome.
meeting with clients, meeting with employees, and you can really develop a story around that. So you can tell, okay, this is what clients are feeling, or this is what employees are feeling, and it translates right into the numbers. And to me, that's what I'm looking at is
Oh my gosh, that is right. You said, I don't know if this is right or wrong. That is beautiful. And what you're saying to me, if I can articulate it back to you, is like the number is not flat. It's got meaning, and
that's right.
in many cases, people are behind that number. Maybe there are results, behind that number, good or bad. There's a story underneath what the number means. So maybe it's, those of you listening, Samir, you nailed it. You totally hit that on the head. Like, what does the number mean? And then what is the story behind that? And I would add, y'all, don't be afraid to tell the story of that number because your audience actually wants to hear that probably more than they want to look at your graph.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
So is there anything, I'm putting you on the spot here, but is there a number that you can remember having some real meaning that you told the story about it and it landed beautifully with an audience?
Yeah, I'll take a second to think.
Like a jump in performance or a percentage of growth that was due to effort. I'm wondering about something like that.
hmm. So, Cindy, I'm thinking of two things
Okay.
at Royal Paper
Yeah.
is we were very much number and data driven
Okay.
and always thinking about the people. So as I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, we're constantly monitoring the safety numbers. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure that our employees came to work safe and they always went home safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really important to convey to the board of directors at
Okay.
Royal Paper.
Okay.
So we would take the numbers and slice and dice it many different ways, but always looking to paint the story of,
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we're doing to keep our employees safe. So that could be translated into maybe we've done an upgrade, like
Yeah.
upgrades to forklifts to make
Mm-hmm.
them more visible and pathways to make the pedestrian pathways even safer. So
Yeah.
that's one of the areas where I feel like the numbers really translated into a huge success story. So we
Yeah, that's
have
a great
excellent safety
example. It's
record.
also making me think of some of the clients and other leaders that we've met with who are in factory oriented industries where like the zero number of no injuries is huge. That's what
Yeah,
we're going for, or like a massive drop in that if there was something earlier. So sometimes those numbers are really ways for us to celebrate a job well done. So yeah, that's
exactly.
a great example.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, Samir, tell me, as we kind of come down a little bit to the end here, what are you seeing in hospitality coming up in the next 12 months in terms of trends or stories you anticipate that we might hear louder? What's going on in your field? What would you like to kind of point us to on the map?
Sure. Well, of course, COVID was terrible for our industry and certainly
Yeah,
for a lot of people.
absolutely.
And luckily, we're through all that. There's still a lot of the revenge travel, and
Mm.
we're seeing it quite a bit. Business travel has slowed down just a little bit. And
Hmm.
so where maybe an employee would come out to New York or Los Angeles for a meeting for 1 or 2 days, they spend a lot of time on the airplane and the
Hmm.
airports. That's being converted to Zoom and virtual
Hmm.
meetings.
Hmm.
But still, the in-person meetings and events are very robust.
Yeah,
A lot of it.
absolutely. Those are really coming back with a vengeance, which is lovely because that in-person connectivity is just so critical when it comes to communicating as authentically and as vulnerably as possible with the relationship building that we're all really, meant to do. I mean, the business is the business, but the people are what make the businesses run, right? And so you
Exactly.
seem to have a real you prioritize that in a way that I think a lot of leaders who are successful have done. And so that's a testament to you and your dad
So
for
thank you.
the lessons he's taught you. What a beautiful storyline just from a family perspective. And I'm sure you're teaching your kids the same things as
We
you
try.
raise them as well. Awesome. That's awesome. Okay, last question, Samir. Is there any book that's on your bookshelf that you're reading or your nightstand or another, like a documentary that you've just watched or listened to that would be a good resource for either a new CFO or a new leader who's coming up the ranks and trying to get a foothold in how to do all this?
Hmm. Well, looking forward to your book, of course.
Thank you.
Yep, can't wait to see it.
Yes.
And let's see. I've been reading The Anxious Generation. It has nothing to do with finance or
Okay, yeah.
um, but that's been a great book, especially as we raise our three kids and
Yes.
figuring out what to do with technology and how we raise them. So
Yes.
that's been top of mind for sure.
How far are you through it?
Halfway.
Okay. Because I've heard also a lot of amazing things about that's like a bestseller all
Yeah,
the way through. It's on my list of books to read too. And in terms of work, right? We have to remember that it's our job to try our best to keep our emotional thermometers as low as possible to reduce anxiety amongst our team. So I bet there are lessons in there that translate to business as well.
absolutely.
I think for our kids, the technology uh, potential for addiction to
Yeah,
technology is not just for our kids, right? We all struggle with the scrollability of life and being present when we want to be present. So great,
exactly.
the
Well,
anxious
it's
generation. Yeah.
interesting to think, my wife and I were just talking about this the other day, is our girls, the oldest are 7 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they would get their driver's permit when they're
Mhm.
16, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm not, or we're not 100% sure that they're actually going to learn how to drive.
Mm.
If you think about all the self-driving
Oh,
cars,
right. Oh, goodness.
here in Phoenix, we have
Crazy.
Waymo and Tesla
Right.
self-driving. So I'm not sure. And it's interesting how much will change in
Oh.
the next, 7, 10 years.
Yeah, and innovation is going at such a rapid pace in all industries, and it is so fascinating to think about how it continues to quicken. It's like, can it even go
Exactly.
faster? And the answer continues to seem to be yes. And that's kind of where On Point comes in, right? We know how fast innovation and innovators need to move. And so the ability to be very adept at that storytelling to move audiences from risk to go is what we are all about, and shortening your path to success with messaging, shortening the path of your innovation to market through clear messaging. That's our main game. We don't want any innovations to be lost because of poor messaging. So we're your safety net. Thinking back to
Yeah.
safety, we'll bring it all home to safety. We like to consider ourselves a safety net for innovators who are trying their darndest to communicate something complex or that's so close to them that it's hard to see from outside the fishbowl. So
Very
that's
important.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Samir, this was so great to have you. How can others find a way to reach you, to just give you a thumbs up, or maybe we have some pilots in the audience who would like to banter with
Exactly.
you. Is there a way to get a hold of you?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn and I love to talk aviation and finance. So reach out
Yes.
anytime. Thank
That
you.
sounds fantastic. Thanks for spending some time with us today, Samir. And thank you for listening to Red Light, Green Light. We are so thrilled to bring to you leaders just like Samir in science, technology, innovation, who are making a difference with their scientific and complex storytelling in the marketplace. So make it a great day, and we'll see you in our next episode. Bye bye.